The smell hit me first. Acrid, chemical, wrong. I found Melissa in our kitchen at 11 p.m., hunched over the granite island like she was performing surgery. Orange flames danced between her manicured fingers, and my passport curled into black ash. What the hell are you doing? I stepped closer, watching my travel document die. She didn't look up, just smiled that cold smile I'd grown to hate over 7 years of marriage, making sure you stay where you belong, Alex. The passport's blue cover blackened completely. She dropped the remains into the sink and turned on the faucet. Steam hissed up between us. I'm leaving for Paris tomorrow, she said, checking her reflection in her phone camera. Business trip. Someone needs to watch Tyler and Zoe. My stepkids. Her kids from her first marriage to some deadbeat who disappeared when child support came up. I'd raised them since they were 9 and 11. Fed them, clothed them, paid for their private school, their cars, their everything. They called me Alex, never Dad. Melissa made sure of that. Since when do real estate agents take business trips to Paris? I asked. Since I started working with international clients. She grabbed her Louis Vuitton suitcase from beside the counter, packed and ready. Stay home and take care of the kids, Alex. That's what poor husbands do. I'm going to relax with someone who matters. The words hung in the air like smoke. Someone who matters. Not me, never me. Don't wait up, she added, wheeling the suitcase toward the garage. My flight's early. I heard her BMW start up, heard the garage door rumble open and closed. Then silence. Tyler's gaming headset chattered upstairs. Zoe's TikTok music thumped through her bedroom door. Normal teenage sounds from kids who'd never once thanked me for anything. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the wet ashes in my sink. 7 years. 7 years of being the provider, the responsible one, the backup parent. 7 years of Alex will handle it, and Alex can pay for it, and Alex doesn't mind. Melissa thought I was poor, thought my tech startup was a failing hobby that barely paid the bills. She'd stopped asking about work years ago, rolled her eyes whenever I mentioned meetings or product launches, called it my little computer thing. What she didn't know, what I'd never told her because she'd never bothered to ask, was that 48 hours ago, TechFlow Industries had acquired my company for $2.1 billion. The money had hit my personal account yesterday morning. Not our joint account. My account. The one I'd opened before we met. The one protected by the prenup she'd insisted on when she thought her real estate commissions made her the breadwinner. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my bank app. The number still looked fake. 9 digits that changed everything. Melissa was in Paris with someone who mattered. Someone she was funding with my credit cards, my joint account access, my money. Someone who probably thought he'd hit the jackpot with a rich man's wife. Time to correct that misunderstanding. I walked upstairs and knocked on Tyler's door. 16 years old, built like a linebacker. Attitude like a spoiled prince. Yeah? He didn't pause his game. Your mom's gone for a week. There's food in the fridge. Don't burn the house down. Whatever. Still didn't look at me. Zoe's door was cracked open. 18, Instagram pretty, cruel in the way only teenage girls could be. She was live streaming, applying makeup at midnight. And my stepdad is so embarrassing, she was saying to her phone. He thinks he's some big tech guy, but he drives a Honda. Meanwhile, my mom's flying first class to Paris because she actually makes money. I kept walking. Let her enjoy the fantasy while it lasted. In my bedroom, our bedroom, I packed a single suitcase. Clothes, toiletries, laptop, important documents. Everything else could wait. I'd lived out of a duffel bag before I met Melissa. I could do it again. The house felt different as I moved through it. Not like home, like a museum of someone else's life. Melissa's decorating choices, Melissa's family photos, Melissa's kids' graduation pictures. I wasn't in most of them. Always behind the camera, always the one paying for the frame. I loaded my suitcase into my Honda, the car Zoe was so embarrassed by. Reliable, paid off, invisible. Everything Melissa had trained me to be. One last look at the house. 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, perfectly manicured lawn. I'd paid the down payment. I'd paid the mortgage for 7 years. But it was in both our names, and Melissa had made it clear whose home it really was, not anymore. I drove to the 24-hour FedEx office downtown and overnighted a package to Margaret Grant, the best divorce attorney in Minneapolis. We'd spoken twice over the years. Once when I was setting up my business, once when Melissa had threatened to leave during a particularly bad fight. Margaret was expensive, ruthless, and available for emergencies. The package contained copies of everything. Bank statements, business documents, proof of the acquisition, evidence of Melissa's affair that she thought she'd hidden so well, screenshots of text messages from her unlocked iPad, hotel reservations made on our joint credit card for 2 people, romantic restaurant bookings in Paris that she'd stupidly synced to our shared calendar. My phone buzzed as I dropped the package in the slot. A text from an unknown number. Can't wait for Paris, beautiful. Your husband has no idea what he's losing. Wrong number? Or had Melissa given someone my contact by mistake? I saved the number and screenshot the message. Evidence was evidence. The clock on my dashboard read 2:47 a.m. Melissa's flight was at 8. By the time she landed in Paris, Margaret would have the divorce papers filed. By the time she tried to pay for her romantic dinner, her cards would be declined. I drove to the Marriott downtown and checked into a suite. The night clerk didn't blink when I paid cash for a week. Rich people had eccentricities. Poor people had problems. Tonight I was rich. The suite had a view of the city, a king bed and silence. No gaming headsets, no TikTok music, no cold shoulders or eye rolls or casual cruelty disguised as family life. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint accounts. 7 years of shared finances spread across the screen. Melissa's shopping sprees, the kids' expenses, house payments, car payments, credit card bills that I'd paid without question. Not anymore. I transferred every dollar to my personal account, closed the joint checking, the joint savings, the joint credit cards, canceled Melissa's cards, Tyler's cards, Zoe's cards, the airline credit card she'd used to book Paris, the department store card she'd maxed out last month. All of it. Gone. The bank's automated system was efficient. By 4 a.m., the Hendricks family's financial empire had collapsed with a few mouse clicks. My phone buzzed again. Margaret Grant, texting from what I assumed was her home office. Got your package. This is going to be fun. Papers filed at 8 a.m. sharp. Asset protection in place. She won't know what hit her. I smiled for the first time in months. Maybe years. Melissa thought she was flying to Paris with someone who mattered, funded by her poor husband's money. Instead, she was about to learn that actions had consequences, that betrayal had a price, and that the quiet man she'd dismissed for 7 years had been paying very close attention. The sun was rising over Minneapolis. Somewhere above the Atlantic, my wife was discovering that her credit cards didn't work, that her bank account was empty, and that her poor husband wasn't quite as powerless as she'd believed. I ordered room service and waited for the real fun to begin. Margaret Grant called at exactly 8:15 a.m., her voice sharp with satisfaction. Papers are filed. Asset freeze is in place. Your wife has been served electronically. I had the court documents emailed to her directly, along with a lovely photo of her burning your passport. Amazing what security cameras can capture these days. I was standing at the suite's window, watching Minneapolis wake up below. How long before she knows? She knows now. Her attorney called 5 minutes ago, scrambling to understand how his client went from wealthy housewife to broke defendant overnight. I may have mentioned the $2 billion acquisition in passing. Professional courtesy. $2 billion. Even saying it felt surreal. 7 years ago, I'd started TechFlow in my garage, writing code until 3 a.m. and living on ramen noodles. Melissa had met me when I was already successful but not yet rich. Comfortable but not private jet comfortable. She'd never asked about the company's growth, never attended company parties or product launches. When clients called the house, she'd roll her eyes and hand me the phone like I was taking orders for pizza delivery. What about the kids? I asked. Stepchildren have no legal claim on you. You never formally adopted them, and they're both over 16 anyway. No custody issues, no support obligations. They're her problem now. Tyler and Zoe. I'd raised them for 7 years, but I'd never been their father. Just Alex, the guy who paid for things. Sir? Margaret's voice pulled me back. There's something else. Your wife's companion isn't who she thinks he is. Explain. Chase Morrison, real name Charles Morrison. 2 bankruptcies, 3 restraining orders from previous girlfriends, currently being sued by his landlord for unpaid rent. He's been targeting wealthy women through your wife's real estate office. She wasn't his first mark. The room service cart rattled outside my door. I let the server in, tipped him, and waited until he left before responding. She thinks she's trading up. She thinks she's found her sugar daddy. He thinks he's found his meal ticket. Both are about to be very disappointed. My phone was buzzing with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails. I'd turned off the ringer, but the screen kept lighting up like a Christmas tree. Melissa, what did you do? Melissa, call me right now. Melissa, my birds aren't working. Melissa, Alex, answer your phone. Tyler, Mom says you stole her money. That's messed up, dude. Zoe, you're pathetic. Mom was right about you. Unknown number, your wife is crying in the airport bathroom. Thought you should know. That last one was interesting. I called the number back. Hello, male voice, nervous. Who is this? Chase Morrison. Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I hung up and blocked the number. No misunderstanding at all. Margaret was still on the line, apparently listening to my domestic drama with professional interest. Mr. Hendricks, I need you to understand something. Your wife is going to come home angry. Very angry. I've arranged for a locksmith to change your house locks this morning, and I'm having her belongings moved to a storage unit. You have every legal right to exclude her from marital property during divorce proceedings, especially with evidence of infidelity. She'll go to her sister's place. Melissa's sister Janet lived in a McMansion in Edina, married to a plastic surgeon. They'd always looked down on me, the blue-collar guy who'd somehow convinced their princess to slum it. Actually, she can't. I called Janet this morning, explained the situation. Janet's husband is concerned about the optics of harboring an adulteress during a high-profile divorce. Something about his medical practice's reputation. I almost laughed. You called her sister? I called everyone in her contact list. Professional courtesy. Let them know she might need a place to stay while she sorts out her legal troubles. Margaret Grant was worth every dollar of her retainer. What's my next move? Stay away from the house today. Let her discover the new reality on her own. Tomorrow, we meet with opposing counsel and discuss terms. Spoiler alert, there won't be much to discuss. I spent the morning at the gym, working out frustration on the heavy bag. The Marriott's fitness center was empty, all mirrors and gleaming equipment. I'd been a boxer in college, before I discovered coding was more profitable than getting punched in the face. Each jab felt like 7 years of swallowed pride. Each hook was a memory of being dismissed, ignored, treated like hired help in my own home. My phone buzzed constantly. I ignored it. At noon, I drove past the house. Melissa's BMW was in the driveway, along with a locksmith's van and a moving truck. Through the front window, I could see her arguing with a man in coveralls who was clearly not impressed by her shouting. I kept driving, lunch at a downtown restaurant I'd never been able to afford before. Steak, expensive wine, dessert I didn't need. The server treated me like I belonged there. Money had a smell, and I was finally wearing the right cologne. At 3 p.m., Margaret texted, "She's out. Locks changed. Belongings in storage unit 247 on Industrial Boulevard. Paid through next month. After that, not your problem." At 4 p.m., Tyler called. "Alex, what the hell, man? Mom's freaking out. She can't get in the house." "It's not her house anymore, Tyler. Come on, this is crazy. She made one mistake." "One mistake?" I was sitting in my car outside a coffee shop watching normal families through the window. Parents who didn't burn passports. Kids who said thank you. "Tyler, your mother has been cheating on me for months. She burned my passport last night, so I couldn't follow her to Paris with her boyfriend. She told me to stay home like a good poor husband while she went to relax with someone who matters." Silence on the other end. "That's..." Tyler's voice cracked. "That's not what she said happened." "I'm sure it's not. Ask her about Chase Morrison. Ask her about the hotel reservations. Ask her about the romantic dinners she charged to my credit card. But where are we supposed to live? She doesn't have any money. She has a job. She has a car. She's a grown woman who made grown-up choices. Figure it out." I hung up and blocked his number. Zoe called 10 minutes later. "You're a piece of crap," she said without preamble. "Mom gave you the best years of her life, and this is how you repay her? The best years of her life were spent spending my money and sleeping with other men. I'd hate to see the worst years. We're family." "No, Zoe. You're your mother's family. I was just the bank." Block, delete. The silence felt wonderful. At 6 p.m., I drove to the storage facility. Unit 247 was the size of a one-car garage. packed floor to ceiling with 7 years of Melissa's life. Designer clothes, expensive shoes, jewelry I'd bought for birthdays and anniversaries. Photo albums that didn't include me. Furniture from her first marriage that she'd insisted on keeping. A life in boxes, paid for by a man she'd never respected. I left a note taped to the unit door. Rent paid through next month. After that, contents will be auctioned. Choose wisely, Alex. My phone had 17 missed calls from Melissa. I deleted them without listening. At 8 p.m., I was back in my suite, ordering dinner and planning my next move. The divorce would be finalized within weeks. The prenup was ironclad, the infidelity was documented, and Melissa's share of marital assets was laughably small. But that wasn't enough. Not after 7 years of being treated like a servant in my own home. Not after watching her burn my passport with a smile. I opened my laptop and started researching. Chase Morrison's social media, his business history, his previous relationships, Melissa's real estate office, her clients, her reputation in the industry. Tyler and Zoe's school, their social circles, their online presence. Information was power, and I'd just become very powerful. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. Alex, this is Janet, Melissa's sister. She's staying at a motel on Highway 7. She's broke and scared. Whatever happened between you two, she doesn't deserve this. I typed back. She burned my passport to travel with her lover. She told me to stay home like a poor husband. She got exactly what she deserved. She says you're lying about the money. Says you're not rich. I screenshot my bank balance and sent it to Janet. 9 digits, clear as day. Janet didn't respond. At midnight, I stood at the window again, looking out at the city I'd helped build with my company's technology. Tomorrow, Melissa would wake up in a motel room, wondering how her perfect plan had gone so wrong. She'd called me poor. She'd dismissed me, betrayed me, humiliated me. Now she was about to learn that the quiet man she'd underestimated for 7 years was just getting started. The motel was exactly what I'd expected. Peeling paint, flickering neon, the kind of place that charged by the hour and didn't ask questions. I found Melissa's BMW parked outside room 127, looking as out of place as its owner. It was 7 a.m. I'd been awake since 5, planning this moment. I knocked on the door. Room service? We didn't order. Melissa's voice stopped mid-sentence when she opened the door and saw me standing there in a $1,000 suit, holding a briefcase and wearing a smile that could cut glass. She looked terrible. Yesterday's makeup smeared under her eyes, designer dress wrinkled from sleeping in it, hair that hadn't seen a stylist in 24 hours. Behind her, I could see Chase Morrison sitting on the bed in his underwear, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Alex, her voice was hoarse. Thank God. I knew you'd come. This is all a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I stepped into the room without being invited. It smelled like desperation and cheap air freshener. You burned my passport. You told me to stay home like a poor husband. You flew to Paris with your boyfriend using my money. Pretty clear to me. Chase stood up, trying to look intimidating in his boxer shorts. Look, man, maybe we can work something out. Sit down, Charles. I used his real name deliberately, watched his face go pale. Yes, I know who you are. 2 bankruptcies, 3 restraining orders, currently being evicted. Quite a catch, Melissa. She was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. How do you know that? And why are you dressed like... Her eyes widened as she took in the suit, the briefcase, the confidence I'd never shown in our marriage. Alex, what's happening? I set my briefcase on the room's single table and opened it. Inside were copies of the divorce papers, bank statements, and a printout of TechFlow's acquisition announcement that had hit the tech news this morning. TechFlow Industries, I said, handing her the printout. My little computer company. Acquired yesterday by Microsoft for $2.1 billion. Melissa's hands shook as she read. Chase looked over her shoulder, his face cycling through confusion, realization, and pure panic. $2 billion? Melissa's voice was barely a whisper. But you said the company was struggling. You said we needed to be careful with money. I said we needed to be careful with money because you spent it faster than I could make it. I never said the company was struggling. You just assumed it was because you never bothered to ask. Chase was putting on his pants with the urgency of a man who'd just realized he'd bet on the wrong horse. I should go. You should. I didn't look at him. But before you do, Charles, let me explain something. I know about Sandra Williams in Denver. I know about Patricia Chen in Seattle. I know about your little pattern of targeting successful women through real estate offices. Very creative. He was at the door now, fumbling with the lock. I don't know what you're talking about. Sandra's husband hired a private investigator. Patricia's brother is a federal prosecutor. They're both very interested in talking to you about fraud charges. Something about fake business credentials and forged financial documents? Chase ran. Actually ran, leaving his shirt behind and his rental car in the parking lot. I heard his footsteps pounding down the motel's outdoor walkway until they faded into traffic noise. Melissa was still staring at the acquisition announcement. $2 billion. And you watched me. I watched you show me exactly who you were. I watched you burn my passport with a smile. I watched you walk out the door to screw another man with my money. I watched you treat me like garbage for 7 years. I sat down in the room's single chair, crossing my legs like I was conducting a business meeting. And now I'm watching you realize what you threw away. She collapsed onto the bed, the printout falling from her hands. Alex, please, I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can read the divorce papers, Melissa. She picked up the legal documents with trembling fingers. I watched her face change as she read. Confusion, then understanding, then horror. Infidelity clause, asset forfeiture, prenuptial agreement, enforcement. She looked up at me. Alex, this says I get nothing. Nothing except half the house equity. $90,000. Split between you and your children, that's about 30 grand each. Should last you a few months if you're careful. But the kids' college funds were in my name. Educational gifts from a stepfather to his stepchildren. Applicable at any time. I'd checked with Margaret this morning. Perfectly legal. Their cars, titled to me, already repossessed. The house is being sold. You have 30 days to collect any remaining personal items. Melissa was hyperventilating now, clutching the papers like they might change if she held them tight enough. You can't do this. 7 years of marriage, Alex. 7 years of my life. 7 years of using me. 7 years of taking my money and giving me nothing but contempt in return. I stood up, straightening my tie. You know what the funny part is? If you'd just asked about the company, if you'd shown even the slightest interest in my work, I would have shared everything with you. The money, the success, all of it. I can change. You had 7 years to change. You chose to burn my passport instead. I walked to the door, then turned back. She was crying now, makeup running down her cheeks in black streams. One more thing, Melissa. I called your real estate office this morning. Told them about your little Paris vacation with the client's boyfriend. Something about professional ethics violations and inappropriate relationships. They'll probably want to discuss that with you. Her face went white. You didn't. I did. Amazing how quickly gossip spreads in the real estate world. Especially when it involves fraud and infidelity. I left her there in that motel room, surrounded by the wreckage of her choices. In my rearview mirror, I could see her standing in the doorway, still holding the divorce papers, finally understanding that actions had consequences. My phone buzzed as I drove back to downtown. A text from Tyler. Mom told us what really happened. We're sorry. We didn't know. Too little, too late. I deleted the message without responding. Another text, this one from Zoe. Please don't sell the house. We'll have nowhere to go. I typed back, you'll have your mother, the woman you chose over me. Good luck. Block, delete. At 10 a.m., I was in Margaret Grant's office, signing the final papers. The divorce would be uncontested. Melissa couldn't afford to fight it, and she had no legal ground to stand on anyway. What's next for you? Margaret asked, sliding the documents into a leather portfolio. I'm thinking Italy. Maybe buy a villa in Tuscany. Start a new company, live quietly. And your wife? My ex-wife can figure out her own life. She's a strong, independent woman who doesn't need a poor husband holding her back. Margaret smiled. You know, in 20 years of divorce law, I've never seen someone execute revenge quite so elegantly. No violence, no illegal activity, just pure consequence. I'm not a violent man, Margaret. I'm just a man who pays attention. I left her office and drove to the airport. My new passport, expedited processing was wonderful when you had money, was waiting at the Federal Building. The photo showed a different man than the one whose passport had burned 3 days ago. This man was smiling. At 2 p.m., I was on a first-class flight to Rome. The seat next to me was empty. I'd bought both tickets just because I could. The flight attendant offered champagne. I accepted. Somewhere below, Melissa was probably calling everyone she knew, looking for help, for money, for a place to stay. Her sister had already declined. Her friends were probably screening their calls. The real estate office had probably already terminated her. Tyler and Zoe were learning that choices had consequences, that loyalty was a two-way street, and that the man they'd dismissed for 7 years had been the only thing standing between them and poverty. Chase Morrison was probably running toward his next mark, if he wasn't already in custody. And I was flying first class to Italy, $2 billion richer and 7 years wiser. The plane climbed through the clouds, leaving Minneapolis and my old life far below. I opened my laptop and started researching Italian real estate. Tuscany looked promising. Rolling hills, ancient vineyards, a place where a man could disappear and start over. My phone had one last message, from a number I didn't recognize. Alex, this is Melissa's mother. What you did to my daughter is unforgivable. She loved you. I typed back, she loved my money. There's a difference. Then I turned off the phone and watched America disappear beneath the clouds. Melissa had told me to stay home like a poor husband. Instead, I was flying toward a new life, richer than she'd ever dreamed possible, finally free from the woman who'd never seen my worth. She'd burned my passport. I'd burned her world. Fair trade. The villa sat on a hillside outside Montalcino, surrounded by olive groves and vineyards that stretched to the horizon, 16th century stone walls, terracotta tiles, and a view that made my chest tight with something I'd almost forgotten, peace. I'd bought it sight unseen for 12 million euros. Cash offer, no inspection, no haggling. The seller's attorney had called it highly irregular. I'd called it Tuesday. The moving truck arrived on a Thursday morning in October, carrying the few possessions I'd shipped from Minneapolis. Clothes, books, my computer equipment, and a single photograph. My college graduation, where I stood alone because my parents had been too drunk to attend, and I hadn't had anyone else to invite. Everything else from my old life could rot. I was setting up my home office when the doorbell rang. My nearest neighbor was 3 kilometers away, so visitors were unexpected. A woman stood on my doorstep, mid-60s, wearing paint-stained clothes and a smile that belonged in a Renaissance painting. Signor Hendricks, I am Francesca Rossi. I live down the hill. Her English was accented but clear. I brought wine, welcome gift. The bottle was from her own vineyard, she explained as I invited her onto the terrace. We sat under the pergola, drinking wine that tasted like sunshine and earth, while she told me about the valley's history. You are running from something, she said after her second glass. It wasn't a question. A marriage that should have ended years ago. A woman who did not see your value. I laughed, surprised by how easily the truth came out. Something like that. My husband was like you. Quiet man, but strong inside. He built this valley's first computer business in the 1980s. Very successful. When he died, many women suddenly remembered how charming he had been. What did you do? I made wine. Better investment than people, usually. We became friends over the following weeks. Francesca taught me about grape cultivation, about the patience required to create something beautiful. I taught her about modern technology, helped her set up online sales for her vineyard. It was a fair trade. My days developed a rhythm. Morning coffee on the terrace, watching the sun rise over the valley, emails with my investment manager in New York. The $2 billion was growing nicely in diversified portfolios. Lunch in the village, where the shopkeepers were slowly accepting the quiet American who paid in cash and minded his own business. Afternoons were for coding. I was building something new, a platform for small businesses that would revolutionize inventory management. Not for the money, I had enough money for 3 lifetimes. For the joy of creation, the satisfaction of solving problems that mattered. Evenings were for wine and books and silence. It was the silence I treasured most. No gaming headsets, no TikTok music, no cold shoulders across the dinner table, no one asking for money or taking my presence for granted or treating me like hired help. Just peace. My phone still worked internationally, though I rarely used it. Occasionally, news from my old life would filter through. Margaret Grant had sent updates during the divorce proceedings, then a final email when everything was settled. Melissa had gotten her $90,000 and nothing else. The house had sold for $400,000. After paying off the mortgage and legal fees, her share was exactly what the prenup specified. Tyler had dropped out of his expensive private school and enrolled in public school. Zoe's college fund was gone, so she was working at a coffee shop and applying for financial aid. Melissa was living in a one-bedroom apartment in a suburb I'd never heard of, working for a discount real estate agency that specialized in foreclosures and short sales. The irony was probably lost on her. Chase Morrison had been arrested in Phoenix, trying to run the same scam on a widow whose son happened to be a federal judge. He was looking at 5 to 10 for fraud. I felt nothing reading these updates. No satisfaction, no regret, no lingering anger. They were strangers now, characters in someone else's story. 6 months after arriving in Italy, I met Elena. She was an art restorer from Florence, working on the frescoes in Montalcino's medieval church. Dark hair, intelligent eyes, and hands that moved like they were conducting symphonies when she talked about her work. We met at the weekly market, both reaching for the same bunch of fresh basil. She laughed when our hands touched, a sound like wind chimes on a summer evening. American? She asked, recovering American, I replied. That made her laugh again. Coffee led to dinner. Dinner led to long walks through the vineyards. Walks led to conversations about art and technology and the way light changed throughout the day in Tuscany. Elena knew nothing about my money. To her, I was simply Alex, the quiet man who'd bought the old villa and seemed to understand that some things couldn't be rushed. You are different from other Americans I have met, she said one evening as we watched the sunset from my terrace. More present. I learned the hard way that money can't buy presents, but presents can make money irrelevant. She nodded like that made perfect sense. We took things slowly. Elena had been married before, to a man who'd treated her art like a hobby and her dreams like inconveniences. She understood about starting over. I told her about Melissa eventually. Not the details, not the revenge, just the simple truth. I'd been married to someone who'd never seen my worth, and now I was free. She must regret losing you, Elena said. I hope she's learned to regret her choices. That's not the same thing. A year passed, then another. The vineyard I'd bought from a retiring neighbor was producing excellent wine under Francesca's guidance. My new company was generating patents and profits, though I kept it deliberately small. Elena moved into the villa gradually, the way sunrise moves across the valley. First a toothbrush, then clothes, then easels and paintbrushes, and the organized chaos of an artist's life. We were married in the village church on a Tuesday morning in spring with Francesca and the priest as witnesses. No fuss, no expense, no drama. Just two people who'd found each other after learning what they didn't want. Elena wore a simple white dress she'd bought in the village. I wore a suit I'd had tailored in Florence. The rings were antique gold from a local jeweler who'd crafted them to our specifications. The ceremony lasted 20 minutes. The celebration lasted 3 days, as the entire village invited themselves to share our joy. That night, as we sat on our terrace, drinking wine from our vineyard, Elena asked the question I'd been expecting. Do you ever wonder what your first wife is doing now? I considered it seriously. Somewhere in Minnesota, Melissa was probably finishing another day at her discount real estate job, going home to her small apartment, maybe wondering how her life had gone so wrong so quickly. Tyler would be in college now, probably on financial aid and student loans, learning the value of money the hard way. Zoe might be working her way through community college, discovering that the world didn't owe her anything. They were all learning lessons I'd tried to teach them for 7 years through example. Sometimes the hard way was the only way. No, I told Elena, meaning it completely. I don't wonder about her at all. Good, she said, curling up against my side. The past should stay in the past. Above us, stars were appearing in the Tuscan sky. The same stars that shone over Minneapolis, but somehow brighter here. Cleaner, full of possibility instead of regret. Melissa had burned my passport and told me to stay home like a poor husband. Instead, I'd found a home worth staying in, with a woman who saw my worth without needing a bank statement to prove it. The villa was quiet except for the sound of wind through the olive trees and Elena's breathing as she dozed against my shoulder. Perfect silence. Perfect peace. Perfect revenge. Not because I'd destroyed my enemies, but because I'd built something beautiful without them.